Welcome to A Waldorf Journey, a podcast for teachers, parents, students, and people who are passionate about Waldorf education. I'm Meredith, and I'm glad you're here. I spent nearly 20 years in the Waldorf classroom, and I learned a thing or two about teaching in all those years, and some of those lessons were not easy. Through it all, though, I've come to the conclusion that there's nothing better than Waldorf for nurturing thoughtful human beings who love to learn. You can find show notes for this episode, along with a lot more useful content on my website, waldorfjourney.com. While you're there, sign up for the newsletter to receive updates about new content on the blog and the podcast. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram as A Waldorf Journey. Now let's get started. Hi, and welcome. I'm really happy to be talking to you today, and it's about a topic that I think is really meaningful to a lot of people when they are first discovering Waldorf education. And when I reflect on my own experience of discovering Waldorf education and really connecting with it, the idea of creating a home life that really resonated with and supported Waldorf education was hugely motivating for me. I was very much enchanted by the idea of how Waldorf could transform my home life. And there were many things that were lovely about that, of course, thinking about Waldorf education definitely enhanced my home life and gave me some goals and an ideal that I could live up to and imagine and try to create in my own home. But there were some challenges for sure, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who has experienced that. And so in these challenges, whether it's with creating a Waldorf home life or creating a Waldorf classroom, I think that those challenges of this creating this lofty ideal and this vision that could never actually be attained, that permeates so much of Waldorf education, and it is a huge reason why in everything that I create and a lot of the messaging I put out there about Waldorf education, I do my best to make it feel achievable and realistic and something that you individual parents and teachers can really rely on their own intuition about. And so that's in large part shaped by my experience when I came to Waldorf education. So I want to talk first of just about what those sort of danger zones are, those places where we can go wrong, where the idea of creating a Waldorf home life can maybe not feel so inspiring and can actually feel a little bit judgmental and not supportive of home life, which then it's really not what it is meant to be. So I want to talk about two things, and first of all is this idea of that we often see in Waldorf circles, this beautiful, perfect vision of beauty and peace and joy that is in particularly early childhood classrooms. And I remember feeling that so strongly when my own sometimes chaotic home life did not measure up to that ideal. I just remember judging myself harshly and also just feeling like, okay, well, I'm doing all the right things. I'm doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing to create a harmonious Waldorf home life, but it's not working, or it's still have this chaos around me. So what am I doing wrong? And I just remember feeling like being pretty harsh with myself and just feeling like I couldn't recreate it. And I didn't even want to admit to myself or others that there was that I wasn't creating it and that I wasn't successfully achieving this perfection, this beautiful, perfect view of a Waldorf home life. So it took me some time to realize that that's a myth, and that whatever, if the moment that it starts to feel full of judgment and not supportive of what you're trying to do, then then it's useless, and we really shouldn't be looking at it in that way. So I wish I'd known that. I wish I had known to be easier on myself, and that probably other people out there were struggling just as much as I was, and I just didn't really recognize it. So that's one thing I just want to mention is that idea of this beautiful, perfect ideal that is just unachievable. The other thing to really mention, and man, oh man, did I get sucked into this, and that is the materialism that can be associated with it. And that is like just the antithesis of what Waldorf education, living a Waldorf harmonious life should be. It really is not about having these, beautiful German expensive wooden toys. It's not about like plant dyed silks and all of that. Like the aesthetic and the very expensive product based aesthetic is not what we should be looking at. It's not. And I will say I loved it. Like I remember that it was actually a huge part of it for me. Like I remember looking at the catalogs and just, dreaming about these, toys that I wanted for my children and products that I wanted for my home, and just how like having those things was just like aligning me with this group of people and this movement that just felt so resonant and important for what I believed was the right thing for my children. So it's true. Like there are certainly things like those German toys are lovely, and they are open-ended, and they give children the experience that we're looking to provide them with, often, not always. But having those things does not make your home a Waldorf home, which I don't even like using that phrase in that way, like a Waldorf home. I want to say more like an intentional home, or a home life that resonates with Waldorf education. Like those are anyway, I will probably say a Waldorf home more, but to know that what that means is different for different people, and that maybe the classic like picture that we see in Waldorf circles about what a Waldorf home is, like it doesn't have to look that way. So all that said, I just want to put it out there, like that I recognize that those are the things, the potential danger, the places where we could, hit some pitfalls as we're trying to create a home life that is more intentional and aligned with Waldorf education. Like there's the potential that we, actually, fall down or go down a path that takes us away from living a more, or creating the life that we're looking for. So let's talk about like what characteristics, like what, if those things aren't what make up a Waldorf home, then what does make up a Waldorf home? Like what are the things that, if you're looking to create a home that is more intentional and aligned with Waldorf education and the ideals, the vision of child development that Waldorf teachers use, what are the things that you should be considering? So to me, the number one thing is rhythm. And so, I talk about that a lot as a teacher and in my, curriculum materials, and about how rhythm is just such an incredibly strong aspect of what we do and how it nourishes the child and supports the child. So we can talk about rhythm, simplicity. So, and really, I think about this in terms of toys, and that, we want to keep things simple so that the child is doing the imaginative work. And so the less we provide, the more open-ended, the more simple the materials and tools and toys are that they encounter, the more they have to do the work of creation. So there's that. And then the third thing is this like beauty through intention. So it's not necessarily like the thing in itself has beauty, which there is that too, but the idea that you've cultivated it and given care, and that each space in your home has been crafted through your attention, and through that also this beauty piece, beauty intention. Natural materials are also a part of that to me. Natural materials and human crafted materials as well. So let's kind of go down this road, and maybe I'm not going to go 1, 2, 3 through that list and talking about them, but let's talk about each one, and starting, of course, with rhythm. So first of all, like, why rhythm? I've talked about this so much, but rhythm is incredibly valuable because it gives these sort of anchor points in a child's existence, right? So they when you have a rhythm, they anticipate what's coming. They can sort of feel more balanced and more like in control because they can anticipate it. They know what's going to happen next. And so when we look to craft a rhythm, a lot of rhythms that we live with in our lives are pretty organic and they just arrive naturally, right? And that's great that is the case. If we're looking to craft a more intentional home life, what we can do is look at those rhythms, maybe the ones that already exist and have, arisen organically, and get more intentional with them. So look at the places where rhythm exists, and then think more thoughtfully about what you want those rhythms to be. So let's take a look. Let's maybe as a case in point. So, well, first of all, let's start talking about where rhythms. So we can talk about daily rhythms, weekly rhythms, monthly rhythms, and yearly rhythms. Like, those are rhythms that I think we all have an experience of. So just quick picture of a daily rhythm, for often, especially working with young children, we're looking at like the big moments, like when they wake up, when they go to bed, maybe when they nap, and then meal times. Those are kind of like rhythms in a nutshell for the young child. Throughout that, in between those times, you might decide to have additional rhythms that give shape and form to your day. And that might doing that might help your children to feel more secure and, be able to anticipate what's coming next. So I remember when my children were young, they, of course, woke up at a certain time. We had, breakfast together. And so that was a rhythm that we had. And then we always went for a walk after breakfast. And so that was this very natural rhythm that we had that just and so the benefit comes when we're wrapping up eating breakfast, and maybe I'm picking up the oatmeal bowls and going and starting to wash them in the sink. And while I'm doing that, the kids are starting to get their shoes on and their coats on because they're anticipating that the next thing is that we're going to go for a walk. So that's like an example of a way that a daily rhythm can really help give form and help your children feel more secure, and also make your life easier, just because there are fewer decisions to make. The children aren't going to have a reaction about, oh, now we have to go for a walk or whatever it might be, because it's just what you do all the time. So think about so you can use rhythm for any of those things that maybe are challenges with your children. So if there's something that they always have a reaction to, try to build a rhythm around it. So whether it's what you have for dinner that night, or what they have to do, bath time, or whatever it might be. If there's a challenging situation that they struggle with, try to find a rhythm around it, and that can often make it easier. I'll just mention like a yearly rhythm that we look at might be something, with the seasons, or something with, often the festivals or the holidays really give our year shape and form. And so just so you have a picture of what those things look like. So, and then weekly rhythms, those are often, interestingly, like, especially with young children really live into the daily rhythms. And when you're looking at weekly rhythms or yearly, those are less maybe resonant for the younger child, because it's just the longer period of time is just not as familiar to them. And so, or they experience it less. It's harder to grasp when there's a rhythm around it, especially the yearly rhythms. They've probably experienced like, 3, 4, 5 of those at their ages, right? So the weekly rhythm, though, is a place where you can be thinking as a parent to really, I find that the weekly rhythms, as an adult, the weekly rhythms definitely have a strong, organic nature to them, just with the weekends and work life and that kind of thing. But often, as a parent, it's helpful for you to create some weekly rhythms, because I think that because they don't often for young children, Monday is the same as Wednesday. And, that those days they might have, maybe they go to preschool 3 days a week or something like that. There's a rhythm in that. But it can be helpful for you to look at a weekly rhythm that you create, and that can help to fill in the spaces between the sort of anchor points of your daily rhythm. So, like, for example, you might have a different activity that happens every afternoon. So, if your children are school age, they come home from school, and on, Tuesdays they do this, on Thursdays they do that, or, whatever it might be. With younger children, you can do it more around, like, there might be a daily activity that you have at a certain time every day, and that activity changes. So, like, in the early childhood classrooms, they often have like baking day or painting day, or different activities that happen at a certain time of day, but it varies on the weekly schedule. I think meals, like dinner nights, we often had tacos on Tuesday nights, or rice on Monday nights, and that just helped me as a parent to like not have to think so much about what we were having for dinner. So I would say the weekly rhythm is one where you have more of an opportunity to create a rhythm for yourself and your family, because maybe it doesn't arise as organically. So thinking about rhythm, looking at where they already exist, and then maybe thinking about them with more intention. Like, maybe you want to direct them in a certain way, but rhythm is so helpful and really an important aspect of your child's life at home. Okay, next I want to talk about the home environment, and I want to caution us in talking about the home environment. This is probably the place where, if we have a consumerist side to ourselves at all, this is the place where it's going to come up, and we're going to wish that we could have linen sheets. Linen sheets are what I have been coveting lately. So anyway, this is the place where all of those things are going to come up, where that consumerist, materialistic aspect of Waldorf education could kind of be popping up. But so let's be aware of that, but we can think about, like, what does the home environment look like? What do we want for, a Waldorf, an intentional Waldorf home to look like? So first of all, we of course think about toys. When we're thinking about young children, and what do we want these toys to be? Well, I mentioned early on this idea of simplicity, and that the idea of simplicity is not so much like because we don't want things to be complicated, but it's really this idea that the simpler things are, the more work that the child has to do in order to build an imagination, to play with it, to create something imaginative. If it's very simple and they're not given, they're not delivered what what it should exactly look like. They have to do the work. So when I first started teaching, actually, I taught early childhood, and my first teacher training experience, my first practicum was in an early childhood home program. And I remember the teacher talking, I mean, she went, in terms of toys, she had very, very few. And really her program was much more about just spending so much time outside. But she did have some toys that were very simple. And then she had a number of like cloths and blankets and, play cloths of different types. And I remember one day the children wanted like a lot of babies. They were playing some like, family game and imagination, pretend game. And they wanted to have lots of babies. And so they took these cloths and they would ball one up to make the head, and they would put another one on, and they would just hold it and then put it in their arms, and that was the baby. And I just loved seeing this because it just meant that they had to do so much of the creation, the imagination, like as they did that, and then they put it in their arms, that it was a baby. They were imagining a baby out of this very simple, thing that they created. So I think that really is the value when we talk about open-ended toys and keeping things simple and natural materials. It's through that perspective. It just started hailing at my house, and so I don't know if you're going to hear this, but anyway, I'm going to press on. But yeah, talk about an experience of the natural world. Okay, so there's that. But then let's talk also about like home spaces, right? So that's the picture of toys. Then the picture of spaces, right? You want, we imagine like this picture is like cozy, calm, warm spaces. And what that really comes to is this point that I wanted to make, especially in early childhood. It is so important for us to consider the sensory experience of the child. And really, so much of early childhood is about protecting the child's senses. And we do that so that they feel comfortable and welcomed to interact with and connect with the world here. If their sensory experiences are harsh and surprising and uncomfortable, then they are going to have this sort of disconnect with the world. And if we think about the child as really coming to earth and having coming into an earthly existence, then we want to make that earthly existence as welcoming as possible for them. And so that's, to me, why we do the work of trying to protect the senses of the child. And that really goes into having these natural materials. And so when you see like, a wooden, a tree branch in a early childhood classroom and you run your hand over it, just the tactile experience of that is so warm and it's meaningful. I'm having a hard time articulating it, but like you can really, there's something deep to experience when you touch a tree branch in a classroom, as opposed to like a plastic toy, that has just that cold smoothness to it, right? So we really are looking at, and we can think about that, like I just described the sense of touch, but we can think about all of the senses, all of the child's senses in this way. So sight, so textures, sound, like taste, all of these things, we're really thinking about protecting the senses so that the child is encouraged to engage with them. So that's really what all those cozy, calm, carefully lit spaces are about, that they're just welcoming sensory experiences. Along with that is really bringing nature indoors and finding ways to honor nature and recognize nature in our home spaces. That to me is another aspect of this sensory experience. And then avoiding overstimulation. And that's one of those sort of abrasive sensory experiences when they're overstimulated, that just encourages them to disconnect from their sensory experience of the world. So we want to really be careful about, providing those experiences that are not going to give them overstimulation, which really anything involving a screen is overstimulating. You can just see, there is some people say something about the flashing, that the pixels, on a screen have, there's just a constant sort of movement in them. I don't experience that, so I can't really speak to that. But I do think, what you see on a screen is often so stimulating. And just even the light of it is that way. So, and I know that there are, shows, and there are things that are programs that are really mindful of this, and try to provide an experience that is more aware of the child's, sensory experiences. But yeah, to me, anything with a screen is going to be overstimulating. So being mindful of that. And again, having realistic expectations for yourself, and, but recognizing the cost. Okay, so I did want to then maybe dive in a little bit and talk about I wanted to mention early childhood, especially around the senses, but we just really talked about that. So but we can talk a little more about thinking, how do these things come up? So if you were to, look at your daily rhythm, like the organic daily rhythms that sort of naturally occur, and you decided that you wanted to enhance them with a little more intention, then you could do that by being mindful of the child's sensory experiences. So what are some things to think about as you're crafting these daily rhythms with more intention, or putting a little more intention behind them? One is, of course, to be thoughtful about the child's sensory experience, right? And if you go through each of the child's senses through that rhythmic experience, then you might have thoughts about what you can do to enhance that rhythm as it exists in your life. So one example that comes to mind is to think about okay, so maybe you're thinking about your child's waking up in the morning, and what do you want for your child's experience to be upon waking up? So if we look at what their sensory experiences are when they wake up, we can just go through them one by one and decide what we want for their sensory experiences to be with intention. So let's think about sound, right? So what do we want the child to hear upon waking up? So they could hear birds chirping, they could hear their mother's sweet voice or their father's sweet voice. They could hear their parent sing a little wake up song, what would be the most welcoming thing for them to hear upon waking up? So it's an experience of sound that is inviting. So that's one example of what you might do. I would say sight too. Think about that. What do you want for them to see? When you open the blinds, or when the light first comes in, do you want, if the shade has been closed overnight, do you want to turn on the light, or do you want to lift the shade? And which of those things is going to provide the maybe gentlest sensory experience? So these are examples, and you could go through all of the senses in this way. Taste, I don't know what you would have your child taste upon waking up, but maybe. So maybe if you're looking to craft something, then to go down that road for each of these things. And And again, I like doing it in this way because, I'm not like prescribing, oh, you should sing this song when your child wakes up in the morning. Like, maybe that isn't the gentle sensory experience that your child would experience. Maybe they wouldn't experience in the same way. You wouldn't experience it in the same way, perhaps. So really thinking about it from your child's perspective and their sensory experiences, and crafting rhythms based on that. So the next thing I wanted to just talk about is more for the grade school child, and that is this idea of involving children in meaningful work. And, children observe us doing purposeful work all the time, and that is, they are noticing it, and they are watching our example all the time. But it's very valuable to involve them in that practical work as well. And you have an opportunity to shape their experience of practical work, of what work feels like. And so if you do it with intention, then you can see that they can develop a healthy relationship with meaningful work. So there are, of course, lots of things that you can involve your children in. As a parent, it's sometimes easier, of course, to just do things ourselves rather than involving our children. So maybe you want to be thoughtful about when you do decide to involve them in the work, but it's definitely valuable and meaningful for them, and that can be one of those weekly activities that you provide for your children, that you have a gardening day or a folding laundry day, and that those things, and often if you bring it early and as part of a rhythm, then they will embrace it and they will enjoy it. So you're using all of the tools that help make that possible. So and then I guess I did have on my list to mention this idea of living seasonally and into festivals and celebrations and holidays, and that is really an example of a yearly rhythm, of yearly rhythms happening in our lives, and it's meaningful to bring intention to these, because often young children have a difficult time with yearly rhythms. It's just it's such a large fraction. A single year is such a large portion of their lives that, it doesn't, seeing the rhythm and the repetition of it is not easy for them. So really looking at ways that you can imbue meaning into the different either seasonal experiences or festivals or holidays that your family celebrates. Families often talk about these things, like when you come together, when you have children, you talk about like what your Christmas celebration is going to be, or whatever it might be. But to really think about that and try to imbue meaning into those yearly experiences, just so that the rhythm of the year can begin to take hold with the child. So that's something to be mindful about. So I hope this has been helpful. And I guess in closing, like, I don't want anyone to fall victim to the trap that I did in, feeling like you had to create this beautiful home life and that you were failing miserably at it, and that it was just completely unattainable. Like, I don't want anyone to have that experience of this. So I hope that I've broken it down in a way that you can really think about crafting rhythm at home in a way that is empowering, and that really this picture of looking at the different rhythmic experiences that your child has, and looking at each one of those through the lenses of the senses, I think can make it feel more meaningful. So I encourage you to think about just one of those daily experiences, those daily rhythmic experiences, whether it's waking up or cooking or eating breakfast or eating dinner or whatever it might be, and maybe think about the one that is the most challenging in your day, and think about the sensory experiences that your child has as a part of that rhythmic, of that aspect of your rhythm, of that moment. Like what are the sensory experiences, and what sensory experiences do you want for them to have that will be inviting? And think about how, just for one moment of your daily rhythm, what is one thing that you can do that will provide a more inviting sensory experience for your child. So I would love to hear if you do this. And it would be, you can leave a comment in the comments on YouTube or in the blog post that goes along with this episode, or send me an email at meredith@awaldorfjourney.com. And I would just love to hear. I hope this has been helpful and that you have a positive experience of trying to create an intentional Waldorf home life. And thanks so much for listening.